the Now That We're a Family podcast.
And we're back with another episode. Today, Katie and I are pretty excited to talk about the subject matter because we've been talking about different things that we think could really kill marriages and things that are like joy killers in marriage and potentially happiness killers in marriage. And for the most part, we don't want those in our marriage, do we?
Well, I'd say we just don't want them at all.
Yeah, not just for the most part, for the all part. We don't want them in our marriage. And so today we're going to be talking about that. Folks, we are so blessed by the ratings and the reviews that we've seen over on iTunes. I wanted to make sure I thanked all of you for making such an effort to go over there and to encourage us with your words or to encourage us by leaving a 5-star rating. That means so much to Katie and I. It really is a huge blessing to us. And it feels far less like a one-way conversation, like when we get to go over there and see the takeaways that you have from this podcast and if it's been of encouragement to you. So thank you so much for doing that.
Yeah, that means so much, Elisha. I'm glad that you mentioned that because I was just laying in bed this afternoon taking a nap and I was thinking of that. I was like, what's kind of incredible is the kind words that people have shared. So thank you so much.
Yes. Katie rarely takes naps, but today, Sunday, we transitioned to recording the podcast on Sunday evenings, and Sunday afternoon naps are one of our favorite rituals that we're pretty consistent in.
Yeah, they are so nice.
I don't mind keeping that one around for a long time.
Yeah, all the kids go down and we go to sleep. And
today actually felt like our first, kind of normal Sunday for like 6 weeks because we had been traveling and then we got sick. And so we didn't go to church for a really long time between travel and then being sick. And so today was our first day going to church, first day in a long time going to church. And that was like such a profound blessing, being together with the saints, worshiping God, hearing from the word, partaking in the sacraments, just the things that you do as Christians. And it was so encouraging. It's crazy how it really just like got my head back to, I don't know, I like feeling like a Christian again almost. It's like thinking like a Christian again. And so I'm so excited that we have that opportunity to, fellowship in a healthy church and to now be physically healthy so that we can fellowship with people in person again.
Yeah, I didn't realize what a big difference it was versus just watching it online. Actually, like being there in the room and hearing everyone sing, it was just so encouraging. So our hearts were really filled today. Yeah. And it's funny because we are listening to a couple marriage podcasts and that always spawns good conversation between us. I feel like anytime Elisha reads a new book or I listen to something new or whatever, it's like, a new conversation. And so we got on this topic of marriage killers and things that are just like really unhealthy for marriages. And so we're going to do this podcast. And I, as Elisha was setting up out here, I was like, I'm going to write down a few more that come to mind.
A few more points.
Yeah. Because there was this main one we really wanted to talk about. And I told him just a few minutes ago, I was like, I have 8 points. He's like, okay.
Yeah. It's funny because I kind of spearheaded this episode. I really wanted to do it. We talked about it a few nights ago, and I was like, I really want to do an episode on that. And then here you are, basically, like coming up with all of the content for the episode. No, I don't think I'll have all the content. But I am excited that you came up with 8 different marriage killers. Got to be on the lookout.
Well, I think so many things can kill a marriage. So once I started going, I was like, there's a lot of stuff here. But I'm excited to hear your 2 points because I think that those are the 2 that I care the most about that we really want to flesh out. But I think it's good to at just various points in marriage to think, okay, kind of revisit, like, what are things maybe we're doing inadvertently that are tearing down our marriage? And maybe they were like natural ruts that we fell into right away, so they feel very natural for our marriage, but like, is this going to show up in 20 years and be harmful, So to actually be intentional and evaluate all these little things, I think is really helpful for any marriage and something that I want to continue to do over and over.
Yeah, it's really scary to think about some things that you've just brought into your marriage without second guessing it, without questioning whether or not it's feeding your marriage in a healthy way or if it's tearing it apart. because those are the silent killers. They come into your marriage and you kind of structure your life around them and you treat it as normal. And they could just be disrupting everything that God's trying to do in your marriage, and corroding at the very heart of your marriage, potential intimacy or just oneness or joy or happiness. So it's always hard when you can't see, your blind spots are your blind spots in so many things that we just grew up with, or that you just assumed because it seems like every other Christian is doing it. Sometimes it's hard when you have to evaluate those things because you've kind of formed comfort zones around them. But it's kind of cool with things like marriage and like our faith, it's like everything's on the table. You're like, these things are so valuable to us and so important. We want to be willing to prune what needs pruning.
And I'm so grateful. Like, you signed us up for a weekend to remember next weekend.
Yes, it's
so we're
like
going
in
to
a
be
couple
doing
weeks.
a marriage retreat, and I'm just excited. It's always bittersweet going into these things because I know we're going to be doing work on our marriage, and it always takes a lot of emotional.
Yeah, like energy.
Emotion? It always takes a lot of emotion and energy, and stuff gets stirred up where you thought, oh, we're good, but the water gets turned a little bit, and it's good, though, because it just brings stuff to the surface that Elisha and I were cool living life with, but every time we go to one of these events and really focus on our marriage, we get to new depths in our marriage, and I'm just so grateful for you signing us up for that.
Like you said, it's a bittersweet. I was reluctant to sign us up because I like our marriage right now. It's like, we're in a good spot.
Yeah.
I don't know if I want to go really start working on it and trying to find things that we could improve upon. But I really want to view marriage as being something that we want to perform preventative maintenance on. And just like with our bodies, we want to be thinking 10 and 20 and 30 years down the road, and what we choose to eat and how we choose to exercise. And I think that there are so many things in our marriage that maybe we can live with today, and we're like, it's probably fine. But I really want to think long term and be proactive and pouring into our marriage in a way that's going to sustain it and keep it vibrant for not just this year, but for decades to come.
Okay, so I want to hear about one of your points.
Well, mine's not much of a point. It was just kind of a concept. I think that's why I was a little bit confused, honestly, with this episode, because I thought we were going to have an episode around this concept.
Okay, well,
but
we can't do that. We can't because...
Are you kidding me? You said you have 8 points. I want to hear them. And I'm just going to kind of say this quickly, but I do think a lot of times when I hear the language around people, especially in the Christian faith, because really when we're listening to marriage podcasts or reading marriage books, they're usually in the context of Christian marriages. It's very rare that I'll go outside of the Christian space for things pertaining to marriage.
Just 'cause it's weird.
Yeah. So in general, when I hear Christians speaking to marriage, and I'm learning great things and I'm picking up tips, it's almost like they have to have this constant disclaimer of like, but it's hard. It's really hard. And my spouse and I, it hasn't been that easy. In fact, we've been through a lot of hardships. Sometimes we've even wondered if we married the wrong person, or sometimes I've even wondered if I was supposed to remain single my whole life. And I've heard different combinations of those types of things really kind of like fleshed out from numerous high profile marriage people. And it's not even a bash on these marriage people, because like I said, Katie and I receive I guess instruction from them and counsel from them on a consistent basis, and we're grateful for them. But something that I have found is that words matter, and the way you speak to your marriage, speak to your partner about your marriage, and the way you speak to yourself about your marriage, I think really affects your marriage, and it affects it in practicality and in reality. And so it's funny because even something that I said the other night, I don't think I had said for a really long time. Maybe I'd said it earlier, but I was like, it's crazy that when we were newlyweds, I thought that I was never going to really felt emotionally understood by you. I felt, because I felt like there was this disconnect between Katie and I there early on in our marriage, where I wasn't going to have much of a friendship with Katie. It's like I knew I respected her, I admired her, I had a lot of romantic feelings towards her, but I just didn't think there was going to be a friendship there. But we didn't, I guess, fall into this victim mindset of like, this just is what it is. We really spoke life to that area. And I can say, like, without any type of, insincerity, that Katie's my best friend. And I never would have, I really didn't see that happening in that first year of our marriage. But I think we spoke life into our marriage and we wanted to work on this area. And I'm saying that to say that I think what words do matter. And so if you wake up every day and you say, marriage is hard, but I'm going to be faithful to my spouse. Marriage is hard, but it's worth the fight. Marriage is hard, but I want to honor God in the way I treat my spouse. Obviously, marriage is worth doing all those things. God puts it on such a high level so that regardless of whether or not it's hard, that it's honoring to be faithful. It's honoring to see it through. But I think sometimes you just it's like accepting this thing that doesn't need to be accepted when you say marriage is hard, but I'm going to pick up my cross, or marriage is hard, but I'm going to die to myself. And it's like, well, no, like all those things are great things to do, but it doesn't have to be in the context of your marriage in general. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I think obviously if someone's teaching from the pulpit, like about marriage or something, it's encouraging. We connect with each other's hard stories, I should say. Like if someone's saying, okay, we went through this struggle in our marriage, it's relatable. It's something that other people can connect with, be like, okay, we aren't alone in this struggle.
Yeah.
So that's not necessarily what our issue was, or what the red flag that kind of went off in our minds when we were hearing a specific couple just repeat over and over. It's basically they had accepted as this fact that their marriage is just a hard marriage. Mm-hmm. And they just both agree to that. They aren't compatible, and they agree to that. They don't have a lot in common, and they, these are just
they're making these big final statements.
Big final statements is like, this is who we are, but we still do our marriage because obviously we want to honor and glorify God, and it's a covenant. And I think that's beautiful that they believe in the core covenant of marriage. But what? Yeah,
well, I do think a lot of, and I'm all for this. Thinking you married the wrong person is not grounds for ending a marriage, or being unfaithful in your marriage, or thinking that you don't connect. So when people say, hey, we've got a hard marriage, or we don't connect as a couple, or we maybe married the wrong person, but we're being faithful, I think they're trying to eliminate maybe a lot of excuses culture will give us, and saying, well, then that's not going to get out of that marriage. If you're not connecting, or if you don't feel fulfilled, or if you're not feel like you're getting built up in who you're called to be, then get out of that marriage. And so they're trying to, I think, silence those lies and say, no, marriage is worth it on every level, regardless of what your reason is. But I don't think you should just leave it at that.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because the way Elisha and I speak about our marriage is just, I think a lot of people assume we have a very easy marriage, or like, oh, they clearly married the right people because they like each other a lot, or they just are romantically attracted to each other, so of course they have loving things to say about each other, or these assumptions. And I think that we can make that those assumptions of other marriages, instead of being like, really, what we're choosing to focus on in our marriage does grow. And if we're choosing to focus on what we love about our spouse, because obviously we loved something about them when we got married, right? So if we choose to speak life into our marriage and focus on the things that are good and lovely and virtuous, and just having that full Philippians 4 focus, instead of stopping at, oh, well, it's true. It's true. We don't connect on this, or it's true. We're opposite in this area and we just rub each other raw. The life that we choose to speak into our marriage can really grow, and we can both change as people, and we can become compatible in terms of like just, I know that the whole compatibility thing can kind of be a lie, because I feel like any person can marry. Once you're like in covenant before God, those two people can continue to change and become compatible.
Yeah.
Like by the standard of that word, I guess. That's a whole nother topic. But I just think you can grow in having lots of things in common, and things that you both appreciate, and all these different things. And so we just really want to make sure, I guess, that we're speaking what we want to be true of our marriage, speaking as if it's already true of our marriage, instead of putting ourselves in these limited boxes of, we're never going to connect here. We're never going to get along in this area. We're always going to rub each other wrong here. and communicating that to other people and to each other is just like, well, that's a fact. So how do we make it work with
Yes.
that being a fact?
That's right.
You know?
Yeah, because what should be a given is, regardless of whether or not we grow in that area, faithfulness and going on the marriage, that's a given. We're going to stay faithful in our marriage, and we're going to see it through its course. But we want to speak to things like, oh, we don't connect on a friendship level. Well, at least we respect each other. At least it's like, no, like I want you to be my best friend. We're going to work towards being best friends and sharing a more type of fun camaraderie in life than maybe what is currently there. And we spoke that, I think, to being something that we get to experience now. And it wasn't like we spoke it into existence.
Yeah, we aren't talking like manifestation, like or anything.
But I think you said it well, Katie, and that is that when you choose to focus on the things that you do appreciate or love or respect or admire about your spouse, it's crazy how that really starts to grow. Not just that characteristic in your spouse, but that feeling that you have towards them in all the areas of their life really starts to grow.
Yeah, and you could just see how people change when they get married in a positive or a negative way based on what their spouse believes about them and how their spouse treats them. And I've seen, women get married and they just flourish. You just thought, oh, they're just this, they're kind of shy and quiet and insecure and whatever. And then they get married and they're just these like confident, beautiful, loving women. And I've also seen it the other way, where someone gets married and they used to be so fun loving and then they get bitter and quiet and resentful. And I think this happens with men too. But it can really it matters what we believe and what we...
Yeah, what we hear our spouse saying about our marriage. Because I can see it, if you're up on stage or if you're writing a book and you go backstage and you're going to say like, hey, let's go out and share about this really hard struggle we went through, you're on the same page and you know what the purpose is. You're trying to encourage couples that are maybe going through a struggle or a hardship. But if you're speaking that way in your home all the time, then I think me as a husband really starts to believe like, oh, Katie just thinks our marriage is hard. Okay, well, Katie just thinks that, she has to, overlook a lot of my shortcomings on a regular basis. That's going to change the way I act in our home. It's going to change my confidence level in our marriage and in myself for sure. And so the speaking those things, not just in agreeing on what you're going to share about your marriage publicly is one thing. But then speaking to one another and speaking, like you said, even publicly speaking life into your marriage, I think is crucial.
Yeah, I think I was like trying to boil this down a little bit as we were talking. And I think it's like, if there's something negative in our marriage, Elisha and I don't treat it. And I pray that we continue to do this as this is an unchangeable, I guess.
That's right.
It's just like everything in a marriage, people change, relationships change, we can learn and grow out of this. And how are we going to do that? I guess we don't want to ever accept something negative in our marriage.
Yeah.
We want to be like, okay, this is how it is today.
Yeah.
But that's not just us. That's not Katie and Elisha.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Because we don't want to ignore the presence of there being something negative in our marriage.
Yeah.
But we don't want to act like it's going to be there forever and it just is what it is. And we are going to therefore be victims to it for the rest of our lives. And so we want to acknowledge it, but then be problem solvers as we approach it.
Yeah, not just accept it. Hold on real quick. Your computer's like in your lap, so I can't see where we're at time-wise.
Oh, okay.
I don't mind if
we
keep it there. But, okay, do you want to just kind of, want to go
No,
through
I want to
all
hear
these?
your points. I
Oh
want to hear
my
your
goodness.
points. I do want to say, because I am so grateful for the marriage ministries that are vulnerable with their marriages and that are willing to share those things. And so I think
That's not what we're talking
That's not
about.
what we're talking about. And so I
Yeah.
want to make sure that people don't think I'm like tearing down marriage ministries. I love them.
No,
I'm
and
grateful for them.
people's struggles, people's hurts. I mean, we want to be vulnerable with you guys on this podcast too, with where we're at. Not in real time, as much as we have been, honestly, but that's not always the best. So it's not mentioning your struggles. It's talking about your marriage as if some things are just unchangeable.
Yeah, I love one of our pastors in Bend, Oregon would always say, just because it's common doesn't mean it's normal. And he was saying, just because it's, he was just saying, in other words, so he would basically say like, oh, I'm going to pray that you guys have a normal marriage. And people would be like, well, what, a normal marriage? And he goes, yeah, like according to God, according to what God says is normal. Because according to God, what's normal is that a man and a woman are faithful to one another. They love one another. They've got a vibrant, romantic, fun, fruitful marriage. That's what God created marriage for. That's how he created. That's a normal marriage, according to God's plan for marriage. But that's not common. It's not common in our culture. It's not common in the world. And I think that oftentimes we can look at what's common and say, oh, that is. So marriage is hard. Marriage is hurtful. Marriage is just so much work. Marriage is a challenge. Marriage, whatever. And I say, well, those are all common things. But actually, the way God created marriage to be is fulfilling and it's loving. And when you believe that, then you want to start seeking out those attributes of marriage because you think, well, this exists out there. This is what marriage was created for. I want to start mining for those treasures in marriage.
That's so good. Yeah, like if I'm not feeling fulfilled or if it's not feeling pleasurable or if it's not a blessing to me, then I want to start bringing that to pass.
Yeah.
We know this is so much easier said than done, you guys, too. I want you all to know that if you are in a really hard marriage, like the Lord's there in the middle of it, and we've gone through really hard seasons where we've been like, looking at each other, like feeling totally disconnected, totally detached.
Yeah, hurt and or angry.
Hurt, and you just don't think you're ever going to get past that barrier. And I can't imagine that going on for months or years or all those things. Or sins being so big, they're hard to, you can't forget them. So you have to just live with it and move past it. And anyway, so we don't want to belittle any of the struggle in marriage. And it is worth the work.
Yes.
And worth the effort.
Right.
Okay. I just feel like so funny going through this list now at like 22 minutes.
Go jump into it.
Okay. All right. I think one thing that came to mind was stopping being friends.
That's a marriage killer.
Friends. I think that's a marriage killer. I was listening. Oh my goodness. Okay. I'm going to put their podcast in the show notes because I just found this marriage and I think they're really encouraging. But they said friendship got you to the place where you wanted to marry each other. If you want to stay married, then keep that friendship with your spouse. And I just thought that's really good.
Yeah.
You don't want to, we know this in business. You don't want to stop doing what got you to where you are. And so just a good thing.
That's so
to
good.
Keep being friends.
I love
and
it.
I think like that unconditional love is powerful. That's what we talked about with the whole, commitment and covenant.
Yes.
With God.
Yep.
But like is what makes marriage fun. When you like each other.
Yeah.
And I think, because you could have unconditional love with someone that's just like, and marriage is just a burden.
Yep.
If you really like someone, that's where it's fun. Okay, replaying a spouse's wrongs or faults in thought.
So just in your brain, in your thought. You're not saying it out loud. Wow.
Because we have the incredible privilege of being able to see our spouse through a magnifying glass. And I think what we think about them, what we choose to think about them, really impacts our marriage. Yes.
Again, you talked about Philippians 4. Is it... Philippians chapter 4 verses, 6 through 8, or is it just 8? Yeah. That whatsoever things are true and lovely and of good report, if there be any praise, if there be any virtue, maybe there's still more things. Think on these things. And the Bible speaks time and time again, be transformed by the renewing of your mind and set your mind on things above, not on things of this earth. We get to choose what we think about. We get to choose what we dwell on. And like you said, it can be so damaging if you choose to let the negative things that your spouse has said or done run through your brain on a regular basis. That's just going to tear down any type of friendship or intimacy or joy in your marriage. You get to choose.
Yeah, and just even how we were saying earlier, like what you focus on, you just start seeing things that will confirm that belief system or confirm that point of view that you have. I feel like we see this a lot in politics. We were just talking
yeah.
about this, how like once you see something a certain way, you see every single thing through that lens.
Yeah.
And you'll have two people that started out with views not that different from each other.
Yeah.
And at the end of like a few months of seeing headlines that you see through that specific lens, you just think that other person is from Mars.
Yeah. Yeah. That's right. Yeah.
Anyways.
It's crazy.
And then it becomes obviously really dangerous. I think that when we think all these things, it's really easy for that to come out and for us to weaponize those, knowing those intimate details of our spouse.
Oh, yeah.
And that's just
it's
so
such
damaging.
a jerk move. And I've done this in our marriage, which is terrible. But you just like start, you start saving up and storing away like your little, like it's like you're going to court and you're like, I'm going to bring this case against my spouse of all these wrongdoings. You're just like saving up
Have
for when you're
ammo.
all this ammo word, and you're just going to drop the bomb. And that's so damaging to just like save up. It's not addressing being wronged is one thing. Saying like, hey, when you said this thing, it hurt my feelings or I felt disrespected. But when you're saving things up and you're running them through your brain over and over again, and you're going to use them to really like drive home your point and just put your heel, in between their shoulder blades and drive them into the ground with it, that's really sinful. And it's really damaging to a marriage. And yeah, like I said, I've totally done that. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely have too. So that's not good. Okay, speaking without kindness. I think it's really easy to develop the familiarity in marriage. And I think that can be a marriage killer when we no longer have this like
filter.
Yeah, filter. Because like we believe in the unconditional aspect of marriage, and it's like Elisha's going to love me no matter how I speak to him. And so instead of speaking graciously, I'll just snap out the same thing that I could have said in a much more kind way.
Wow. And I do this when I will ignore things that you say. It is funny how you see the things come out, because I feel like if we're being honest, you get a little bit more snappy and on edge.
Yeah.
And if my default is just kind of acting like you didn't say something, and it's probably like a guy-girl thing. I don't know. I feel like that's very stereotyped.
Maybe stereotypically.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, stereotypical thing. But it's like I would have never done that when we were dating or when we were engaged, and I had this filter of being highly in tune to how I was coming across to you.
I think you actually would have, and I would have misunderstood it. I was like, oh, I don't think you heard me.
Yeah.
Where now I'm like, you're ignoring me. Yeah. So just keeping that, and I think this familiarity, that can be the same thing with how we dress, how we speak, how we act, all those things, instead of still wanting to impress and still wanting to be kind and loving and win them over, instead of just being like, well, we're in a covenant before God, so live with it,
Yeah, I've got BO, deal with it. It's like, no, take a shower, put some deodorant on. Yeah, because, exactly.
Yeah. Okay, my fourth thing that I wrote down was stopping the pursuit and stopping responding.
What do you mean by that?
Well, you still pursue me.
Yeah, I think the pursuit's a little bit more straightforward. But
And I think the response is just as important, because, again, I've been listening to a lot of marriage podcasts, and this one guy was saying he just got burnt out of doing stuff because his wife wasn't responding. It was kind of like, okay, you bring me flowers, great, thanks. Or you book a date night, you're supposed to book a date night. Or, just kind of having expectations, I guess, for the pursuit. Like, you're supposed to make me feel loved and feminine and beautiful and things like that. Instead of like, oh, I'm going to light up, or I'm going to flirt, or I'm going to thank him or write him a card, or it's this this positive cycle. I think either spouse can push the momentum wheel a little bit by giving a little bit of pursuit. And if the other person doesn't respond, it's very discouraging to continue pushing that wheel.
Yeah, and on the flip side, if you make an extra effort to have my favorite song playing when I come home, or the candles lit, things that I really appreciate that are kind of above and beyond, and I don't acknowledge it, and I don't praise you for it, and I don't show gratitude, then it really can kind of be a momentum killer.
Yeah.
Like what you said. Or if you make an effort to, get a really pretty dress on, I just,
if you don't say oh, wow, you look beautiful, I'm less motivated.
Yeah. It's like last time I'm wearing a dress for you. Yeah.
And like you see people, I respect people so much who do the one-sided pursuit for so long and win their spouse over. I
Yeah.
think that's what we're called to in Christ is
Yeah.
that unconditional pursuit.
Yeah.
But again, going back to the whole like thing, it is a killer if you aren't responding.
It's not very fun.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is
Yeah.
not fun.
Yeah.
So yeah, just keeping that going. Speaking ill of each other to others. I feel like that's kind of an obvious one.
Say it one more time.
Speaking ill of each other to others.
Oh, yes.
I mean, that goes without saying, but this is also really uncommon when you don't, like, if you go to like a girls' Bible study or a girls' group and they're like bashing their husbands. Like
That
acting
happens a
like,
lot.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
he's my fifth kid or whatever. Or,
Sure.
you know, just acting like they're these little children you have to babysit and take care of. And, oh, it's so exhausting. They always want sex. And, you know, just like, and
Yeah, the
that's not-
tone
yeah,
and
the
the
tone and the just demeaning,
attitude, yeah.
like, oh, we're going to get together and complain. And I think that happens in guys groups too.
100%. Yeah. It's kind of like, oh, got the old ball and chain back at home, you know, like, oh, she's nagging, got all the honey-do lists and whatever. I don't know what the things guys say because I never partake, you know, and I don't say any of them.
I
No.
do trust you.
You know,
I do trust
well,
you to
what's
speak
crazy
well
is
of me.
as I do think that I really failed in our first year of marriage when I would go with the guys or I would let myself say things where I'm like, I don't even believe that, but you just kind of join in the conversation. I can remember clearly sometimes driving home to see and being like, why did I say that? You know, like Katie's not naggy or, you know, she's not psychotic. Why did I say she was psychotic?
Elisha
No, I'm
Fear.
joking.
That one might have been more true. Oh my goodness. Okay, I've got 3 more, and then I want to hear your last one.
Okay.
You said you had 2.
Yeah, I did.
Probably just said that to beef up your list. Okay. Isolation. I think that the devil really wants to isolate us as believers, as spouses, and he can do that with sin. He can do that with all kinds of things, I think. And I love the concept of the principle of sharing that Audrey and Jeremy Roloff shared on their podcast. They got it from someone else. But it's this concept of shared interests where, like, if Elisha likes hunting, there must be something to like about hunting. And so it's worth trying to find what's likable about it. You know, so like, or if I like reading a certain kind of book or whatever, that means that there is something to like about that book.
Yeah.
So even if that's not like Elisha's go-to talk about that, trying to find, okay, what does she find interesting about this? Or what is intriguing about it or worth liking about it?
Yes.
And I think that's a fun way to, if you don't have personal interests right off the bat that align, to be like, okay, well, how can I engage in something that my spouse really likes or enjoys?
Yeah. I think that togetherness and doing stuff as a couple is something that I want to continually revisit in our marriage. Because even as you're saying this, I think that we've let some unhealthy habits creep into our life and we've just let them be normal. You know, where we spend a lot of time with, I think Katie and I spend more time with each other than the average couple between like 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. Because I work from home a lot. So I'm popping up from my office and asking her questions. I eat lunch with the family a lot of times and I just get to spend a lot of time with you. But I feel like that's almost given us or given me maybe sometimes license to, after the kids go to bed, just to kind of like go do my thing. I go down and I play music or I listen to music or I try to, or I read or and this isn't, we don't do this all the time, but we do it far more now than we did in our early marriage. I think.
Yeah, because in our early marriage, I was like so lonely because you were at work all the time.
Yes.
And so
It was
I was
different,
just
yes.
like, where are you? And now I have the kids to keep me company
Yeah.
and it's just different.
Again, I feel like we're
It's not
spending a lot
bad
of
to
time
have
with each
alone
other.
time.
Yeah, and I think we have been spending a lot of alone time with each other, but I could see a lot of the habits that we're forming now being carried on even into seasons where maybe I'm working a lot more, you know, away from home and I'm not seeing you. And then we're used to having, you know, I don't know. It's just something I think that
Yeah.
we constantly need to be evaluating.
Yeah, and I do think it is really important to have, it's kind of like along the whole concept of the whole friend thing, having things to do together that are fun, that we both enjoy doing.
Yes.
And if both of us came into marriage with different things that we enjoy, then finding new things. It's not like we've tried all the things in the world and we have I have my 3 hobbies and Elisha
I know.
his 3 hobbies. Like there's so many different
There's
things.
a lot of things
to get into.
You're
and
so right.
So if we're going through a season where we don't have any shared interests, we can get new ones.
Yeah, that's right.
But I do think that's really important. Just like when our kids are gone, we want to have, fun things to do and these things to connect on. And this is something I'm talking so much on this episode.
Well, you had 8 points and I only had 1, so it makes sense. I like what you're sharing.
But I was thinking, I think this is so important to do getaways without kids, even if it's overnight, because I think some kids are a security blanket. They can become a security blanket and they're joyful and wonderful and a blessing and we want to be there for them. And obviously it's so important that we have them with people that, we trust to take care of them. But going years without getting away with your spouse is so dangerous because we don't know how much we're clinging to those security blankets. Like when the baby's not there needing us in nursing and do we want to hang out with our husband for hours on end or are we going to be bored out of our minds?
Yeah. Or when you go on date night and you just talk about the kids the entire time because it's important stuff to talk about, child training or the hardships that you're having with the parenting. It's funny because I think for the most part we've had a great friendship throughout marriage.
Yeah.
But I feel like there have been times that I can't put my finger on it where we've gone on a date and it's like, what do we talk about?
Yeah, totally.
What's interesting? Should we just talk about our budget again? That always puts us in a good mood.
No, I don't. Yeah. Elisha, I think I brought up a budget 3 times in our marriage and I know never to do it again. Oh my goodness. No, but I think this kind of comes back to that whole shared interest thing because you and I do a lot of things together and have a lot of shared interests. So I feel like we have a lot of different things to dream about and talk out when we're on dates.
And I'm grateful for that.
Okay, 2 more. Stop touching. I think that is something that kills marriages. Touching in just a fun way as you go throughout the day or evening or morning or whatever, just kissing or Elisha, you never walk past me without grabbing me or putting.
Okay, hold on now.
Just generalities here. Or you'll just if you're sitting on the couch and I'm walking past to go to the bathroom, I'll run my hand along your back or you'll squeeze my hand or I feel like we have a lot of passing touches. Just non-sexual passing touches.
That's what you think. Oh my goodness. Would you really qualify those as non-sexual passing touches?
A lot of them.
Wow. Okay.
Okay, Elisha, you know what I'm talking about. Holding hands in the car, holding hands when we go to sleep.
Yeah.
Just things that are just I acknowledge you here and I like you and
yes,
okay, we have a lot of the other kind too, but that's not what I'm referring to here.
Yeah. Okay. I know I'm tracking with you. No, I appreciate that too. I love holding your hand when we're driving in the car. And I do I love rubbing your shoulders if whenever I come home or I come and I see you, I come, I don't know. Yeah. I like seeing you.
Oh my gosh, just aware of how much you do this, but I think it's really sweet. And I think it's something that our kids are watching and, people who say, oh, well, PDA is just not our marriage style. And I'm not saying that's a great thing or whatever to make out with your husband in public if that's not your thing.
Well, we don't do that very often.
Very often. Not crazy, but give him a long kiss in public or something like that. But I feel it's really healthy for kids to see that. And because they're seeing a healthy...
Our kids, like your kids.
Oh my goodness, am I not communicating this very well? Yes.
I don't know. I'm just kind of black. Once you started talking about touching, I honestly checked out. So
I think I really appreciate it, I should say. Seeing my dad and mom kiss and hold hands and flirt with little touches throughout the day. It gave me a lot of security as a kid, being they like each other, they love each other, and it also made marriage look very fun and sweet. And it still brings me so much joy to, go to Elisha's family's house. And if Joe and Lisa are in the room, she'll come sit next to him on the couch and scratch his back or hold rub her legs. And it's just
they're
really
very
sweet.
snuggly, and they have been my whole life, and that was extremely it felt very securing. It was a very secure element to like my childhood.
Yeah.
To see that they really enjoyed each other, and
And I think all those touches throughout the day do lead to it being a very short distance from A to B when it comes to like a sex life,
Yeah, I do know.
You're warmed up. It's not like, who are you, stranger? Yeah. Okay, the last thing would be just plain being lazy. I think it's easy to just be like, you know what? Got a ring on his finger. He's got a ring on mine. Yeah. And now we are going to go about our other business, and we're just too tired and busy to put effort into our marriage. And I think that is a huge marriage
It's a killer. I've felt that before. Like, I don't know if you have. You probably know when I've felt it. It's probably those times where I just like act like I don't hear you, where it's like.
I can't be a lot of work.
No, we've loved our marriage in general, but there definitely I can remember and think of times where whatever, it's a big day or you're tired or whatever it is, and you just like bring up something that I don't want to talk about or that is just, it's just not interesting to me. And I'll just be like, oh, man, like do I have to be a part of this conversation? Like, can I just kind of like take a break from
you
this
can say that sometimes. Just FYI, I've told you that. I'm like, just say, hey, I don't want to talk about it. Instead of like
I know.
Staring at the wall.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying you just have to like endure every annoying thing your spouse does without saying a thing. You can like let your spouse know and you can grow through it. And those things aren't annoying. It's usually me that's in the wrong and I'm just not in a good mood. But if you live into that and you just let it take root, boy, that just does not bode well for your marriage.
Yeah. Or I think of things like you still, like this year, you've brought me more flowers than like any year, I think, since us being married. And that takes time you don't just go to grocery stores. So I feel like you doing that always means so much to me. Or like taking time to write a letter or taking time to like go the extra mile. It takes time and effort. And there always seems to be a lot of other pressing things to do. And so I just appreciate that I don't feel like you take me for granted. And I don't want to take you for granted in our marriage.
I don't ever want to do that either. Oh, that was great, Katie. That was so good. I loved all those points.
What a crazy episode, you guys.
No, I'm glad you brought up all your points.
Get on the same page before we turn on 3 cameras and 2 mics and a computer.
I felt on the same page with you on all your points.
Well, I had fun, so.
Me too. And all I know is I just want to be aware of marriage killers because I don't want anything killing our marriage.
No.
Folks, thank you so much. We'll talk to you next week.
See you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye.